Dear listeners, in a woman's life, there is perhaps no greater pain than being mercilessly humiliated by her own husband, the man she shares her life with, in front of the entire world. And that humiliation is multiplied 1,000 times when it happens in the middle of a lavish housewarming party. Under the authoritarian and complicit gaze of my mother-in-law, in the instant that 2 brutal slaps made my mouth bleed, my entire world seemed to crumble. But it was in that precise moment of maximum humiliation that I silently took out my phone to make a call they all considered the ravings of a madwoman, but they didn't know it was a call from destiny, the call that would turn their housewarming party into the funeral of their fictitious wealth. Moments before, the dazzling crystal chandelier, valued at over $50,000, radiated an opulent golden light that reflected off radiant faces, designer dresses, and glasses of bubbling champagne. Melodious music mingled with laughter and lively conversation, creating an atmosphere of prosperity and distinction. This was the housewarming party for my husband's family estate, an event held in a sprawling $10 million mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, an area known as the playground of New York's elite. I kept to myself in a discreet corner near the buffet area. I was still wearing the simple cream-colored crepe dress I had worn countless times. I felt completely out of place, like a dissonant note in this symphony of luxury. I am Chloe, the wife of Ethan, the eldest son of this family, but in the eyes of everyone here, I am just a small-town daughter-in-law, an orphan from a humble background, who got lucky enough to marry up by catching the eye of a wealthy young man. "Chloe, what are you doing just standing there? Go serve wine to the CEO right now." My mother-in-law, Madeline's voice rang in my ear, harsh and commanding. She swept past me, draped in a red velvet gown with a brilliant pearl necklace at her throat. She looked incredibly elegant, but the look she gave me did not hide her contempt. I nodded hastily. I picked up a bottle of expensive reserve wine and tried to walk as gracefully as possible on heels I was not used to. My heart beat a little faster. I am not made for these noisy parties or these complex social relationships. I approached the VIP table where my father-in-law, Walter, was entertaining an important guest. "Excuse me, sir, would you care for some more wine?" I leaned in, trying to fill the CEO's glass with the brightest smile I could feign, but perhaps because of the attention, my hand trembled slightly. A few drops of the dark red wine spilled, staining the sleeve of the guest's impeccable white shirt. "Oh, dear!" the man exclaimed, startled. The whole table fell silent. All eyes were fixed on me. "I am so terribly sorry, sir. I truly am." I panicked. I put the bottle down in a hurry and clumsily fumbled for a paper napkin to try to clean it for him. "But what on earth are you doing?" Walter's voice roared. "My furious father-in-law. You can't even pour a glass of wine properly. How useless." "Relax, Walter. It's not a big deal. It was just a small accident." The guest quickly intervened, showing magnanimity, although his eyes couldn't hide his irritation. Madeline, who had seen everything from afar, rushed over, her face contorted with fury. She didn't say a word to me. She simply shot a look at her son, Ethan, who was standing nearby, a look as sharp as a knife, an imperious gesture with her chin. It was a signal, a silent command. Ethan froze for an instant. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, but under his mother's pressing gaze, he approached me. He didn't say a word. To my disbelief and the stunned gaze of hundreds of guests, he raised his hand. Smack. A brutal slap left the mark of his 5 fingers on my left cheek. I staggered, my ears ringing. My mind went blank. I couldn't believe it. The husband I had always loved, the one who whispered sweet words to me every night, had just hit me. But the hell wasn't over. One slap isn't enough to teach her a lesson. She needs to be taught what respect is. Madeline's voice rang out again, cold and cruel. And then, like a soulless puppet, Ethan raised his hand again. Smack. Another slap, even harder than the last, on my other cheek. This time I couldn't stay on my feet. I fell to my knees on the cold marble floor. A metallic taste of blood spread through my mouth. The entire hall fell into a deathly silence. The music had stopped. Everyone was stunned. Some felt pity, others reveled in it, and some simply watched the spectacle with indifference. I was kneeling at the center of attention, of humiliation. My cheeks burned with pain, but that physical pain was nothing compared to the one tearing my heart apart. I raised my head and looked at them. Madeline stood with her arms crossed, an expression of pure satisfaction on her face. Walter had turned his head, feigning disinterest. And Ethan, he stood there, looking down at me with a coldness and distance that chilled me to the bone. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. All my patience, all my sacrifices over a year as a daughter-in-law, suddenly became a farce. I had been wrong. Wrong to believe in love. Wrong to give up my true self to play the role of a poor girl from a small town. They thought I was weak, that I would only know how to cry and beg, but they were mistaken. The extreme pain and humiliation did not break me. On the contrary, they awakened my true self. A self that had been dormant for too long. Slowly, I got to my feet without anyone's help. I brought my hand to the corner of my mouth to wipe away the trace of blood with a gesture so calm it was terrifying. I stopped looking at them. Silently, I took my phone out of my small clutch. The party was again filled with murmurs. What did they think I was going to do? Call someone to complain? An orphan like me had no one to call. Hey, who are you calling? Your parents in heaven to come save you? A mocking voice was heard, followed by some laughter. I ignored it all. My fingers slid quickly across the screen, searching for a contact saved as Leo. I pressed the call button. The call connected instantly. Yes, Madam President, I am at your service. The voice on the other end of the line was exceedingly respectful. I didn't respond. I simply spoke. My voice was cold as ice, without a hint of emotion, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. Leo, I'm giving you 30 minutes. Seize the estate at 27 Oakhaven Lane in Greenwich. Evict all unauthorized persons from the premises. Immediately. Having said that, I hung up, leaving behind a whirlwind of astonishment, mockery, and an arrogant family that had no idea their housewarming party was about to become an irreparable tragedy. If you too are holding your breath, waiting to see what happens after Chloe's fateful call, whether this is a joke or a spectacular plot twist, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the exciting developments of this story. Your support is our greatest motivation to continue bringing you meaningful and captivating stories. The luxurious ballroom fell into a strange silence after my call. A few seconds ago, the atmosphere was noisy and vibrant. Now, it was so quiet you could hear the clinking of ice cubes against the crystal of the glasses. Everyone looked at me with disbelief, as if I had just spoken in a language from another planet. Then, like a chain reaction, the laughter began. At first, restrained chuckles, but soon they turned into open, merciless laughter. The slaps must have gotten to her. She's gone crazy. Seize, evict. What movie does she think she's living in? Poor girl, the shock must have made her delusional. It's not easy marrying into a rich family. The comments and jeers echoed from all sides without any shame. My husband's family, after a moment of bewilderment, quickly regained their air of superiority. Madeline was the first to burst out laughing. She laughed so hard she had to hold her stomach. Oh, for heaven's sake. Did you hear what my little country daughter-in-law said? She says she's going to seize this very house. She must watch too much TV drama. She turned to me with a look full of contempt and false compassion. Chloe, dear, are you all right? Do you want me to call a psychiatrist to see you? A couple of slaps have driven you mad. Ethan, my husband, after the initial shock, quickly joined his mother. He approached me. His face no longer showed the cruelty from before, but a feigned concern. He tried to take my arm, but I took a step back with a glacial stare. Chloe, please, don't make any more scenes, he said in a low voice, trying to seem understanding. I know you're hurt, and I'm sorry I got angry, but you can't say these foolish things and embarrass the whole family. Everyone is looking at us. Come on, go rest in the bedroom. I'll take care of everything. He was trying to play the part of a reasonable husband, calming his distraught wife. They, his whole family, believed I was a simple pawn, a helpless victim they could trample and humiliate at will. They couldn't imagine that the small-town girl they despised was actually the one holding the destiny of their entire family in her hands. I said nothing. I simply walked to an empty chair in a corner of the room and sat down. I took a handkerchief from my purse and gently dabbed the blood trickling from the corner of my lip. I was frighteningly calm. My calmness seemed to irritate them even more, convincing them that I had truly lost my mind. The party resumed, but the atmosphere was no longer the same. People ate and drank while casting furtive glances at me, whispering. I had become the laughingstock, the topic of conversation for the evening, but I didn't care. In my mind at that moment, there was no pain or humiliation, but the memories of a year ago, the day that pushed me into this cruel charade. A year ago, I was Chloe Vance, the shadow president of IV Capital, one of the largest and most mysterious private investment funds in the United States. My parents passed away early, leaving me an immense fortune and a profound life philosophy. Money is a tool, darling. You can use it to build, but it can also destroy you. Learn to master it. Never let it master you. Tired of the world of high society, full of fake relationships and people who only approached me for my money and status, I longed for something simple, a true love. I wanted to find a man who would love me for who I was, for the normal Chloe, not for the president of IV Capital. And so, an audacious plan was born. I created a completely new identity. Chloe, an orphan girl from a small town in Ohio who had moved to New York City to make a life for herself. I rented a small apartment. I got an office job at a regular company. I wanted to experience the life of an ordinary person to find what I was missing most. And then I met Ethan. He was the commercial director of a construction company, the expanding family business. He was handsome, elegant, and spoke sweetly. He courted me with persistence and passion. He said he didn't care about my past or my family background, that he only loved my simplicity and authenticity. By his side, I found the feeling of being loved, of being protected. I believed his words, his tender gaze. Naively, I thought I had finally found the prince of my life. Our wedding wasn't overly ostentatious, but it was enough for his family to show off to friends and relatives. I became his daughter-in-law and began a life in what I believed was a happy family. But the dream shattered quickly. From the first days, Madeline and the rest of the family did not hide their contempt for me. They criticized me for my background. They mocked me, calling me the country girl. They forced me to quit my job to become a housewife, serving the entire family. They controlled every penny I spent, treating me like an unpaid maid. I endured it. I tried to do everything possible to please them, all because I loved Ethan and because he was always by my side, comforting me with sweet words. Honey, my parents are a bit difficult. Try to put up with it for me, okay? As long as we love each other, that's enough. And I believed him. For him, I endured the humiliation. For him, I gave up my self-respect. I had no idea that all his love, this whole marriage, was just part of a larger plan, a plan calculated down to the smallest detail. And this $10 million estate, the place where I was now being humiliated, was the clearest proof of their conspiracy. A conspiracy that, ironically, I myself had orchestrated from the shadows. The melodious music started again, trying to dispel the awkward and strange atmosphere that had taken over the party. People began to toast and laugh again, but the conversations were no longer natural. From time to time, curious and compassionate glances were directed towards me, the one sitting alone in a dark corner like a wounded animal awaiting its fate. They didn't know that this animal wasn't wounded, just crouching, waiting for the moment to pounce on its prey. I took a sip of water. The taste of blood in my mouth still hadn't gone away, but instead of making me feel pain, it made my mind clearer and colder than ever. I observed this luxurious estate. Every detail was etched in my memory, not as the daughter-in-law of this family, but as an investor. About 6 months ago, when Ethan and I were still in the passionate dating phase, his family's construction company, Hamilton Construction Corp., plunged into a serious financial crisis. Due to Walter's poor investment decisions and deficient management, the company was on the brink of bankruptcy. They owed money to banks, suppliers, employees, a colossal debt of several $1,000,000. They had sought help everywhere, knocked on the doors of all the banks and major investment funds, but no one dared to rescue a sinking ship. It was then that, through some intermediaries, Walter came to my investment fund, IV Capital. Of course, he had no idea that the person at the helm of that mysterious and powerful investment fund was his son's small-town girlfriend. I remember perfectly the day Walter and Ethan came to the IV Capital office to present their financing proposal. I was not present. The ones who received them were my assistant Leo and my team of analysts. I was sitting in my private office, watching the entire meeting through a live camera feed. I saw Walter's anxious and pleading expression. I saw the focus and ambition in Ethan's eyes. They presented a promising business plan, potential real estate projects, attractive profit figures, but my team, with the eyes of professional investors, quickly spotted the gaps, the risks, and the lack of transparency in their accounting. "Madam President, this project is too risky," Leo informed me after the meeting. "Their management capability is weak, cash flow is unstable, and the probability of recovering the investment is very low. Following the rules, we should reject it." I was silent for a long time. Rationally, Leo was absolutely right. Any investor would have immediately dismissed that file, but emotionally, it was the company of the family of the man I loved. I thought maybe it was a test for Ethan's love and also for myself. I decided to take a risk. "We will invest in them," I told Leo, "but not as equity. We will give them a loan with an extremely strict contract." And so, a loan agreement for $10 million was drafted. That amount was enough for Hamilton Construction to pay off all its old debts and have working capital for new projects. In return, they had to mortgage all the company's assets, including all real estate properties, machinery, equipment, and also the valuable personal assets of the board members, who were mainly from Walter's family. And the most important clause, the one they probably didn't read carefully in their joy at being rescued, was that the borrower committed to using the entire loan for the exact purpose presented in the business plan. Any misuse of the funds, however small, would be considered a serious breach of contract. In that case, the lender would have the full right to demand immediate repayment of the entire loan, both principal and interest, without prior notice. This $10 million estate was actually part of the collateral for that contract. It was bought with my money, the money of IV Capital. The Hamiltons were simply tenants in their creditor's house without knowing it. I was the true creditor, the one who held the life of their entire family in my hands. I gave them a chance, a way out. I hoped that after being saved from the abyss of bankruptcy, they would value it, focus on the business, and that Ethan would truly love me with a sincere love. But I was wrong. I was terribly wrong. They didn't use the money to refloat the company. Instead, what did they do? They used it to build a castle of deceit. Immediately after receiving the $10 million from IV Capital, an amount that was like a godsend to them, the Hamilton family did not get to work restructuring the company or solving its fundamental problems. Instead, the first thing they did was rebuild their image, or, to be more precise, polish their glamorous facade that had cracked. They believed that in the business world, appearance and ostentation are sometimes more important than real competence. They had to prove to their partners, their competitors, and society that Hamilton Construction was not only not bankrupt, but was entering a new golden era. And the most effective tool to achieve this was to spend money. A lot of money. The sprawling estate in Greenwich, one of the most expensive areas in the country, was purchased immediately. They didn't pay in installments, but in cash, an act of pure ostentation to demonstrate their financial power. They did not hesitate to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars more on hiring the best interior designers, turning the house into a miniature palace with all kinds of luxuries imported from Italy and France, from the noble wood dining table and the oil paintings by famous artists to the smart sound and lighting system. Everything had to be the best, the most expensive, so that anyone who entered would be impressed and amazed. Along with the estate came a fleet of new luxury cars. Walter traded his old Mercedes for a brand new Bentley. Madeline treated herself to a bright red Porsche convertible, and Ethan, he also bought a top-of-the-line BMW sports car. They drove these cars through the wealthy neighborhoods, attended luxury events, all so that people would see the spectacular comeback of the Hamilton clan. And of course, brand name items could not be missing. Madeline and Ethan's sister became VIP clients of all the high-fashion boutiques on Madison Avenue. Chanel bags, Christian Louboutin shoes, Dior and Gucci dresses filled their enormous closets. Many of them, still with the tags on, lived like royalty, enjoying a life of luxury and opulence with the very money they had borrowed to save their company. They had completely forgotten the true purpose of the loan, forgotten their commitment to the investment fund. They had flagrantly breached the contract from day one. And I, in my role as the small-town girlfriend, witnessed it all. When Ethan proposed to me and I accepted, he took me to meet his family in this very estate. I still remember the feeling of awe and a little bit of inferiority. At that moment, I truly believed his family was rich and powerful. I thought I was very lucky that someone like him loved me, and when I became their daughter-in-law, I had to live under their criticism and contempt. A country girl like you. To have entered this house is already the luck of a lifetime, so behave yourself, Madeline told me in my first week as a daughter-in-law. They treated me like a parasite, an unpaid servant, when in reality, it was they who were living off my money. Every time I saw them in their designer clothes, driving their luxury cars, a sense of irony washed over me. I could expose the deception at any moment. I could snatch away all these falsehoods with a single call. But I didn't. I kept enduring, playing my role as a submissive daughter-in-law because I still had a small hope. I hoped all this was just superficial ostentation, that deep down Ethan was still the sincere man I had fallen in love with. I told myself that maybe after stabilizing their image, they would focus on the business and everything would get better. I gave them time. I gave them a chance. But I was wrong. Human greed is a bottomless pit. Their ostentation became increasingly ridiculous, and today's housewarming party was the culmination of that falsehood. They invited hundreds of people, influential figures from the business and political world, not to share their joy, but to display their power, to seek new business opportunities. They were using the very house I had loaned them money to buy as the stage for their theater of wealth. And I, the true creditor, became a pawn, an accessory, and was even publicly humiliated. Ethan's 2 slaps not only caused me physical pain, they shattered all my illusions, my last hopes. They showed me their true face, a family rotten to the core, built on lies, greed, and cruelty. It was time for this play to end, and I would be the one to bring down the curtain so everyone could see the raw, shameful truth behind the dazzling stage. 30 minutes. I gave them 30 minutes to continue enjoying their false wealth. The last 30 minutes of the play they had worked so hard to stage. During that time, I remained seated in my corner, silent as a shadow. The swelling on my cheek was beginning to show, throbbing with pain, but I no longer felt anything. My full attention was on my wristwatch. The second hand moved forward, tick-tock, constant and cold, like the steps of death approaching. The party continued, but the atmosphere was no longer the same. After my family scene, people seemed a bit self-conscious. They kept laughing and toasting, but the curious glances and whispers did not cease to be directed towards me. I had become a stain, an unpleasant black spot on the perfect picture the Hamilton family was trying to paint. Madeline, after gloating over having disciplined her impertinent daughter-in-law, put her mask of a gracious hostess back on. She strolled among the tables on Walter's arm, smiling and chatting with important guests, as if nothing had happened. Ethan also quickly forgot his act of violence and returned to his role as the elegant young heir, the successful and talented commercial director. He moved through the room socializing, exchanging business cards, discussing future projects. They acted too well, they were too professional. Watching them, no one could have guessed that in just a few minutes all this glamour would vanish like smoke. 15 minutes passed. I looked out the window. The New York skyline was still brilliant, but I knew that somewhere in the city, an order had been given. My assistant Leo, famous for his precision and efficiency, was surely mobilizing his team, preparing for an unexpected visit. 25 minutes. I stood up. My action immediately attracted the attention of some people. I didn't head for the door or my room. I walked directly to the center of the hall, where there was a microphone on a lectern. I took it. A soft hello from me echoed through the speakers, enough to make the entire noisy hall fall silent. All eyes turned to me once more. Ethan and his family also turned, looking at me with surprise and irritation. What the hell is she going to do now? I could read in Madeline's eyes. I scanned the room with my gaze, observing the unknown faces, the people who had witnessed my humiliation. Then, my gaze rested on my husband's family. I looked directly into Ethan's eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began. My voice no longer trembled with fear, but was clear, firm, and full of authority, a voice I didn't even know I possessed. "I am Chloe, the daughter-in-law of the Hamilton family. First of all, I apologize for interrupting your lovely party, but I believe there are some truths that need to be clarified here and now." "Chloe, what the hell are you doing? Get down from there right now," Ethan roared, his face red with anger and embarrassment. He tried to come up to pull me down, but I raised a hand to stop him. "Don't be in such a hurry. Your play and your family's play has lasted for a year. Now let me say the ending." I turned to the guests. "You find yourselves in a very luxurious estate, don't you? You are probably amazed by the wealth and success of the Hamilton family. But do you know something? All of this, from the house, the luxury cars, to the wine you are drinking, is all borrowed." The hall filled with murmurs. "Liar! Are you insane?" Madeline shouted, but I didn't give her a chance to continue. "And the creditor, the person who generously lent them $10 million to build this castle of falsehood, is none other than myself." If my previous sentence had caused murmurs, this one prompted a deathly silence. People looked at me, then at the Hamilton family, completely confused. "What are you saying?" Walter, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, his voice trembling. Just at that moment, the main door of the hall burst open. Everyone turned in unison, and the scene they witnessed left them all horrified. A group of men in impeccable black suits, looking extremely professional and with an overwhelming air, entered in a line. They moved quickly and with organization, like a special operations team on a mission. At the head was Leo, my trusted assistant. He wore a perfectly tailored Italian suit. His face was cold, expressionless. Behind him, a team of a dozen people, including lawyers, asset appraisers, and tall security personnel. Their sudden appearance, with such an aura of power, completely froze the party. The music stopped, the laughter ceased, only gasps of astonishment and an atmosphere of extreme tension remained. The guests, businessmen, and officials accustomed to luxury were now stunned, looking at each other, not understanding what was happening. "Excuse me, who are you people? Who allowed you to enter here like this?" Walter, as the host, tried to regain his authority and stood in their way, but Leo didn't even stop, didn't even glance at him. He walked directly towards me, still at the lectern, and gave a 90-degree bow, a gesture of absolute respect. "Madam President, I have arrived. Everything is ready according to your orders." "Madam President." Those two words, spoken by a man with Leo's bearing, were like an atomic bomb exploding in the middle of the hall. All the gazes that went from astonishment to total confusion turned back to me. They began to look at me differently. The small-town girl in the simple crepe dress, the one who had just been slapped and knocked to the ground. Impossible! It couldn't be so absurd. The Hamilton family, and especially Ethan, were the most shocked. He was petrified, his eyes wide, fixed on me and Leo. He couldn't believe that his wife, whom he had always looked down on, was the president. President of what? "Very well," I nodded to Leo. Then I took the microphone. My voice became colder and more authoritative than ever. "You are all probably very confused. Allow me to introduce myself again. I am Chloe, or to be more precise, Chloe Vance, President of the Board of Directors of the investment fund IV Capital, 2 Vor Capital. The name might be unknown to ordinary people, but for the entrepreneurs and financiers present, it was a name that could not be ignored, a shark of an investment fund, famous for its bold acquisitions and for a mysterious leader who had never shown herself in public. Now, that mysterious leader was in front of them, under an unimaginable identity. "You're lying," Ethan finally stammered, his voice trembling with disbelief. "It can't be. You're just an orphan from a small town." "Right?" I interrupted him with a mocking smile on my lips. That was the play I staged to search for something called true love, but unfortunately, I failed. Instead of love, I only found a family of swindlers, greedy and abusive. I turned to Leo, not wanting to waste any more time. Leo, begin. Leo nodded and signaled his team. The lawyers began to disperse, politely but firmly inviting the guests to leave. Ladies and gentlemen, the party is over. Due to certain legal matters that need to be resolved, we regret to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately. We appreciate your understanding and apologize for the inconvenience. The guests, though very curious, seeing the professional and determined attitude of the legal team and the security personnel blocking the exit, did not dare to stay. They left hastily, still whispering about the scandal of the century they had just witnessed. Meanwhile, Leo, with a thick file in his hand, went directly to Walter, who was still paralyzed by shock. Mr. Walter Hamilton, representing Hamilton Construction Corp. Leo's voice was icy. I am the legal representative of the IV Capital Investment Fund. According to Article 7, Section 3, of Loan Agreement Number 2023 IVCS, the borrower has seriously breached the commitment on the use of funds for the intended purpose. The entirety of the $10 million was not used to restructure the company, but for the purchase of personal assets and for expenses not contemplated in the approved business plan. In accordance with Article 9, Section 1 of the contract, in the event of a serious breach by the borrower, the lender has the full right to unilaterally terminate the contract and demand immediate repayment of the entire debt, including principal and default interest. We are here today to officially execute the debt collection decision. All assets mortgaged in the contract, including this estate, all vehicles, and other assets in the name of the company and in your name, your wife's, and your son's, will be seized and auctioned to settle the debt. Every word from Leo was like a death sentence. Walter's face went from white to ashen. He staggered, clutched his chest, struggling to breathe. No, it can't be. You are swindlers. Dad, Ethan shouted, running to support his father. Madeline stood like a statue, her mouth agape, unable to utter a word. Her empire of lies, her house of cards, was collapsing before her eyes, quickly and irreversibly. The collapse of an empire, even a false one, is always accompanied by chaos and desperate cries. As soon as Leo finished speaking, the estate, which until then had been plunged into a deadly silence, erupted. Swindlers! You're a bunch of swindlers! Madeline, after a few seconds of paralysis, finally reacted. She lunged at Leo, trying to scratch him. Her elegant bun came undone pathetically. Her made-up face was stained with tears and anger. This is our house! You have no right. Get out! Get all of you out of my house! But before she could touch Leo, two security guards stepped in, holding her firmly by the arms, professionally and without ceremony. Mrs. Hamilton, please remain calm. We are executing a court order. Any act of resistance will be recorded and could constitute a crime. The voice of one of the lawyers on the team sounded cold and legalistic. Meanwhile, the appraisers, with their tablets and specialized equipment, began to disperse throughout the estate. They worked with speed and efficiency. Every object, from the crystal chandelier, the crocodile leather sofa, the expensive paintings, to the bottles of wine in the cellar, was photographed, recorded, and marked with a red seizure sticker. The click of the cameras and the sound of tape echoed in the space, like the sound of termites methodically devouring the luxurious shell of the Hamilton family. Stop! Stop it right now! Who gave you permission to touch my things? Madeline screamed helplessly, seeing an appraiser about to seize the display case where she exhibited her collection of Hermes bags. Those are mine. I bought them with my money. You have no right. Ma'am, according to the contract, all recently acquired valuable assets are considered to originate from the loan and are within the scope of assets to be recovered, the lawyer replied with an unalterable voice. Walter, whom Ethan had helped to a chair, seemed to have aged 10 years in a matter of minutes. He sat there with a vacant stare, watching the chaotic scene. His pride, the authority of a man who had valued appearances above all else, had been shattered. He no longer had the strength to shout, only murmuring to himself, "It's over. It's all over. Ethan, after trying to revive his father in vain, finally turned to face me. He was no longer shouting, no longer angry. Instead, in his eyes there was a plea, a pathetic appeal. He stumbled forward and suddenly knelt before me on the cold floor. "Chloe, Chloe, I beg you." He began to cry, the tears of a man who has lost everything. "I know I was wrong. I'm a bastard. I didn't know how to value you. But please, give my family a way out. Tell them to stop. You just have to say one word and they'll listen to you. I beg you. For the love we had as husband and wife." Love as husband and wife. I looked at the man kneeling at my feet, his face covered in tears and snot. Just an hour ago, he himself had slapped me until I bled. Just an hour ago, he looked down on me with the arrogance of a superior delivering a punishment. And now he was talking about love as husband and wife. How ridiculous. I said nothing. Just looked at him with eyes as cold as ice, without a hint of emotion. I felt no pity, no satisfaction, only an infinite disgust. My silence seemed to make him even more desperate. He crawled forward, trying to hug my legs. "Chloe, say something. You can't be so cruel. After all, I am your husband." "Husband," I finally spoke, my voice hoarse and full of sarcasm. "From the moment you raised your hand to hit me, you lost that right. And from the moment your family treated me like an object to be trampled on, you stopped being my family." I gently pulled my leg away from his hands. I turned to Leo, who was still standing there, watching everything calmly. "Leo, hurry up. I don't want to stay in this filthy place a second longer." "Understood, Madam President." Leo nodded. He gave a signal, and the seizure process accelerated. Outside, tow trucks had already arrived. Walter's Bentley, Madeline's Porsche, and Ethan's BMW were loaded one by one onto flatbeds, ready to be taken to an impound lot. The seizure was carried out publicly, under the gaze of many curious neighbors who had gathered at a distance. The scandal of the Hamilton family could no longer be hidden. About an hour later, almost everything was done. The opulent estate now looked desolate, covered in conspicuous red seizure stickers. Leo approached the Hamilton family, the three people huddled and dazed on the only sofa that hadn't been seized. "Sir, ma'am, and young Mr. Hamilton, according to procedure, you have 30 minutes to collect your essential personal belongings and vacate this property. After 30 minutes, the security team will proceed to seal the entire residence and change the locks. Any unauthorized entry attempt from that moment on will be legally prosecuted." 30 minutes. A cruelty, but completely legal. From being the owners of a $10 million property, they now had only 30 minutes to become homeless. The collapse of their false empire was finally complete. The brief 30 minutes passed in a terrifying silence. The Hamilton family, the three people who had lived at the pinnacle of luxury, now wandered like ghosts through the house that no longer belonged to them. They no longer had the strength to shout or resist. The raw reality had completely annihilated them. Madeline, the woman accustomed to having servants, now had to pack her own clothes into an old suitcase. The designer dresses, the expensive bags she loved like her own life, everything had been seized. She couldn't take anything but a few pajamas and cheap personal items. Walter sat motionless in the chair, his eyes empty, staring into infinity. The shock seemed to have drained all his strength and spirit. He packed nothing, just sat there like a statue of failure. Ethan was the only one showing some activity. He quietly went into the bedroom, gathering some clothes for himself and his father. His face no longer showed pleading or anger, only a terrifying emptiness. From time to time, he would look up at me, standing in the doorway, supervising everything with Leo. In his eyes was a mixture of hatred, regret, and perhaps a hint of incomprehension. He probably still couldn't understand how his wife, the naive small-town girl, had transformed into such a powerful and ruthless person in a single night. "Time's up," Leo entered, his voice unyielding. "It's time for you to leave." Madeline broke down in tears. She clung to an antique vase, her favorite decorative object, refusing to let go. "I'm not leaving. This is my house. I'm not going anywhere." But her words no longer held any weight. 2 security guards approached and gently but firmly pried her hands from the vase and escorted her to the door. The three of them, once the masters of a magnificent property, now each with a small suitcase, walked out with their heads bowed through the imposing iron gate. Under the curious gazes and murmurs of the neighbors, the estate gate slowly closed behind them. A dry creak resonated, as if putting a final period on a chapter of false splendor. I watched them from the balcony, seeing them standing disoriented on the sidewalk, not knowing where to go. I felt no satisfaction, only a deep weariness and emptiness. Was this what I wanted? Did seeing them so miserable truly make me happy? But then my hand unconsciously brushed against my cheek, which still ached a little. The image of the two slaps, Madeline's dismissive look, Ethan's cruelty. It all came back to my mind. No, I did not regret it. This was the price they had to pay for their arrogance, for their malice, and for having trampled on another person's dignity. That night, they had to spend their first night as homeless people. With the little money they had left, they couldn't afford a decent hotel. They had to find a sordid, damp motel in a back alley of the city. The room, barely 100 square feet, smelled of mold, a brutal contrast to the luxury they were used to. Madeline, who had never known hardship in her life, couldn't bear it. She cried, screamed, and smashed the few pieces of furniture in the room. Walter sat in a corner, submerged in a terrifying silence. And Ethan, he had to face an even harsher reality. His phone wouldn't stop ringing, not with calls from partners or friends, but from creditors who had smelled the collapse of his family. "When are you going to pay? Are you planning to hide?" Threats and insults bombarded his ears. He had to turn off his phone, hiding like a rat. From the peak of ostentation, they had fallen into the abyss of humiliation in a single night. The string of days facing the raw, hard reality was just beginning. And I knew that in the long, sleepless nights that awaited them, amidst the panic and desperation, they would surely do one thing: find out at all costs what Ivy Capital was and who the woman named Chloe Vance really was. The following days were an endless nightmare for the Hamilton family. They had not yet recovered from the shock of being evicted from their own home when they had to face an even more terrible storm: the persecution of creditors and the total collapse of their reputation. The news that Hamilton Construction, a well-known construction company, had been completely seized by a mysterious investment fund overnight spread like wildfire in New York's business world. The tabloids jumped in, weaving all sorts of scandalous stories. Photos of Walter, Madeline, and Ethan dragging their suitcases out of the estate were captured by paparazzi and published widely on social media. The Hamilton clan, from being a symbol of wealth, became everyone's laughingstock. Their business partners, those who once flattered them, now turned their backs on them en masse. Not only did they cut all ties, but they took the opportunity to claim old debts. Hamilton Construction, already rotten from within, officially declared bankruptcy. The last door had closed. Living in the cramped and sordid motel room, the three of them were like cornered animals. Fear and desperation turned into arguments and mutual accusations. "It's all your fault for your incompetence in business," Madeline would scream, pointing at her husband. "If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be in this situation." "Oh, right, as if you were perfect." Walter, after days of silence, finally exploded. "If it weren't for your vanity and your insatiable demands, I wouldn't have had to risk borrowing money from that investment fund." Ethan sat in a corner, silently listening to his parents insult each other, but in his mind was not the worry about debts, but a huge question, an obsession he couldn't shake off. Who was Chloe? Why did she have such terrifying power? What exactly was Ivy Capital? Curiosity and a faint hope of finding a weakness in me to turn the situation around pushed him to act. He began to use the few contacts he had left, old friends from the business world, to investigate. At first, all the information was vague. Ivy Capital was too big and mysterious a name. No one knew its organizational structure or its true leader. All transactions were conducted through law firms and high-level representatives. But Ethan did not give up. He followed the trail of the loan agreement itself to the law firm that represented Ivy Capital. Of course, they refused to provide any information, citing client confidentiality. But Ethan, with the cunning and audacity of a desperate man, did not give up. He managed to approach a low-level employee of the firm and, using the last of his money, bribed him for information. And then, one afternoon, as he sat in a sidewalk cafe, he received a call. "Hello, is this Mr. Hamilton?" The voice on the other end of the line whispered, "I've found the information you need, but it's very sensitive. Are you sure you want to know? Tell me." "I'll pay whatever it takes," Ethan said with an urgent voice. The person at the head of IV Capital, the one with the final decision-making power, is a woman. Her name is Chloe Vance. Chloe Vance! Ethan repeated the name. It sounded familiar, but he still couldn't connect the dots. Yes, she's the only daughter of the late chairman, Arthur Vance, the founder of the fund. It's said that after her parents' death, she has lived a very discreet life, almost never appearing in public. People only know her by the title of President of IV. The phone fell from Ethan's hand onto the table with a thud. He was paralyzed. Chloe Vance, President of IV. All the loose pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicked into place, forming an unbelievable truth, a truth so terrifying it was unbearable. His wife, Chloe, the small-town orphan girl he had always belittled and despised, was actually Chloe Vance, the mysterious and powerful president. Ethan's world fell apart. He sat there in the middle of the crowded cafe, feeling a chill that seeped into his bones. Now everything was crystal clear. The chance meeting, the love at first sight, the timely help from IV Capital, everything, absolutely everything, had been part of a plan, a perfectly orchestrated play. But he was not the director. He was just a puppet, a clown, nothing more. He had felt superior. He had thought he was manipulating and deceiving a naive girl, but in reality, he was the one being deceived, the victim of the most painful and humiliating joke. The shock gave way to a dreadful fear. What had he done? He had humiliated that powerful woman. He and his family had treated their creditor like a dog. What would the consequences be? The seizure and bankruptcy were probably too light a punishment. The terrifying truth not only shattered Ethan, but plunged his entire family into a state of absolute panic. When Ethan returned to the motel and told them everything, Madeline and Walter couldn't believe their ears. "What? What are you saying?" Madeline stammered, her already gaunt face now even paler. "That country girl is the president? Our creditor?" "Yes," Ethan replied in a hollow voice. "She has deceived us all. From the beginning, we were just puppets in her play." "Oh my God," Madeline screamed and collapsed onto the bed, crying inconsolably. "Why? Why did this happen? Why did she have to pretend to be poor to trick us like this? What have we done to deserve this?" She still didn't recognize her mistake, only knew how to blame others. Walter remained petrified in the plastic chair. He didn't cry, he didn't scream. His collapse was silent, but even more terrifying. All his pride, the authority of a man who had considered himself the pillar, the smartest, had been shattered. He had been easily fooled by a young woman he despised. That humiliation was more painful than the loss of his fortune. After the initial panic, another emotion arose in them. Fear. They began to remember everything they had done to me. Madeline remembered her insults and mockery, the times she forced me to serve her like a maid. Ethan remembered the 2 slaps, his derogatory words, and even the plan to cheat on me with another woman he was hatching. They knew that what had happened, the seizure, was just the beginning. The revenge of a powerful and wounded woman would surely be much more terrible. And so they decided to act, not to confront, but to beg. They no longer had any position to fight. Their only hope now was my forgiveness, my compassion. The next morning, Ethan went to the headquarters of IV Capital. He no longer had his elegant appearance. He wore old clothes, his face gaunt, unshaven, looking pathetic. He stood in front of the skyscraper's entrance, trying to request a meeting with President Chloe Vance. Of course, the security team stopped him at the entrance. "Excuse me, sir. Do you have an appointment? I am the president's husband. Please, let me see her." His words only received looks of contempt and mocking laughter from the security staff. "The president's husband? Are you crazy? Get out of here if you don't want us to throw you out." Rejected without ceremony, Ethan did not give up. He stood there from morning until evening, in the sun and rain, enduring the curious glances of passers-by. He hoped I would see him, that I would take pity on him, but I didn't appear. I knew all his movements in advance thanks to Leo's reports. I didn't want to see him, at least not yet. Seeing that they couldn't get close to me at the company, they tried something else. Madeline and Walter, the two people who once valued appearance over life, had to humiliate themselves. They went to the old apartment where I had lived when I was playing my role as a small-town girl. They hoped to find me there. They rang the bell, knocked on the door, but only silence answered. They asked the neighbors, those who used to see me come and go alone, "Miss Chloe? We haven't seen her in a long time. We heard she moved somewhere else." All their efforts were in vain. It seemed I had disappeared from their lives, but my shadow, my power, loomed over every second of their existence. Finally, almost desperate, Ethan made one last attempt. He found my personal phone number, one I rarely used. He called me not once, but dozens of times. I didn't answer. Then he started sending text messages, long, pleading messages, full of regret. "Chloe, it's me. I know I was wrong, that it's unforgivable. I am a wretch, a man who doesn't deserve to be called one. My mother manipulated me, greed blinded me. Those 2 slaps haunt me every night. I beg you, give me a chance to redeem myself. I don't want money. I don't want anything. I just want you. I've realized that I truly love you. Chloe, please, let's meet one last time." Those words, if they had been for the Chloe of a week ago, might have softened me. But the Chloe of now, after knowing the whole truth, only found them ridiculous. Love. He still had the nerve to talk about love. But then an idea crossed my mind. Meeting him one last time was perhaps the right thing to do. Not to forgive, but to put a clear end to it, to unmask his final lies. I replied with a short message. "Tomorrow at 10 at the usual cafe, where you first declared your love for me." I wanted to see, in the same place where the lies began, how he would continue to play his farce. The small cafe tucked away in a quiet alley of the Upper East Side, the place I had chosen for our final meeting, felt strangely suffocating and tense. The morning light filtered through the large window, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air, but it failed to warm the coldness that enveloped our table, a coldness that emanated from the silence, from the naked truth, and from a heart that had turned completely to stone. Ethan sat across from me, motionless like an enchanted statue. His handsome and charming face, which had once captivated me, was now as pale as wax. His eyes were wide, fixed on the screen of the tablet that lay on the table, where the irrefutable evidence of his betrayal was displayed in the most raw and merciless way. The intimate photos of him and his lover on a trip to Street, Bart's, a trip he had told me was for work, the steamy conversations, the promises of a future without me, and above all, the audio recording of their conversation, clear as water, where they planned to take all my money and then abandon me without mercy. Everything was like invisible hammer blows that struck and shattered the small, pathetic hope he had left, pulverizing the script he had prepared. He had probably thought that today's meeting would be an opportunity to continue his act of a repentant husband. He would use his crocodile tears again, his sweet words, his desperate hugs to beg for forgiveness, to manipulate my emotions one more time, as he had done so many times. He was too confident in his own charm, too confident in the supposed love he thought I still blindly felt for him. He couldn't imagine that I had not come as a betrayed wife seeking an apology, but as a judge about to deliver a sentence. "No, it's not like that," he finally managed to stammer, his voice trembling and almost inaudible. He looked up at me. His eyes no longer held the confident plea from the beginning, but the absolute panic of a cornered beast with no escape. "Chloe, it's all a misunderstanding. She and I are just good friends. She had problems, and I just wanted to help her. That recording was her trap. Yes, she set me up to destroy our happiness." "Friends?" I let out a dry laugh, a cold and scornful laugh that echoed in the silence of the cafe. "Friends so intimate as to go to a clinic together for a pregnancy test, Ethan? Friends so intimate as to plan how to fleece your wife and then abandon her? Do you take me for a fool? Or do you think everyone is stupid enough to believe that cheap excuse?" I no longer called him by any affectionate name. He didn't deserve it. "How long are you going to keep up this charade?" I continued, my voice icy. "Who do you love? Me or her?" "No, let me rephrase the question. Do you love anyone in this life, or do you actually love no one but money and yourself?" Ethan was speechless, unable to find a more plausible excuse. All his masks had been torn off. His facade of a loving husband, of a pitiable man pushed by circumstances, had all been shattered. Now, in front of me, there was only a professional emotional con man, a human being whose greed and selfishness were etched into his DNA. He buried his head on the table. His shoulders shook. It was unclear whether from fear or humiliation. His play, an elaborately constructed play over a whole year, had finally reached a pathetic end. But his punishment was not over. It had just begun. "All this evidence," I said, my voice now firm and cold as a death sentence, "will be sent by my lawyer directly to the court with the divorce petition. Not only will you leave with empty hands, but with what you have planned, you could also face charges for fraud and embezzlement." "But that's not all, Ethan." I stood up. The chair screeched as it was pushed back, a dry sound that broke the silence. I looked at the broken man at my feet, the one I had once loved with all my heart, and who was now just a pathetic and despicable figure. "You've probably forgotten something important," I continued, my voice laced with irony. "You and your family live in a very nice estate, right? You drive very luxurious cars, don't you? But have you ever wondered where all that money came from? Did you ever wonder why a company on the brink of bankruptcy like Hamilton Construction was able to get such a large loan?" Ethan lifted his head abruptly, his gaze confused, not understanding where I was going with this. "As the largest creditor of Hamilton Construction Corp., the one who owns all the mortgaged assets of the company and your family through Ivy Capital, I am pleased to announce a new decision." I deliberately emphasized each word so he could hear them, so he would understand how stupid he had been to play with fire. "I will not limit myself to executing the debt. I will exercise my right as a creditor and take full control of the company. And the first thing I will do as the new president will be to issue the dismissal order for the commercial director, Ethan Hamilton. Congratulations. As of tomorrow, you are officially unemployed." My last statement was like the final blow of a sledgehammer, not just against his assets, but against his career, against the last vestige of his pride, the only lifeline he thought he could cling to. He stood there, paralyzed, his eyes vacant. He had lost everything: wife, lover, an unborn child, money, house, and now his job. I turned around without looking back, walking coldly out of the cafe. I didn't want to see his miserable state, not for a second more. The sky outside was still clear, the sun was shining, but I knew that a terrible storm was about to break over the life of Ethan and his family, a storm they themselves had created, and I was simply the one who decided when it would arrive. My words in the cafe were not an empty threat. They were a detailed, cold, and calculated plan of action. That same afternoon, I convened an emergency meeting with the legal and financial team of Ivy Capital. The order was clear and immediate. The next morning, while Walter and Ethan were still in shock, a team of experts from IV, led by Leo and the best lawyers, showed up at the headquarters of Hamilton Construction. They did not arrive as clients or partners, but as the new owners. With irrefutable legal documents, from the loan agreement and the mortgage to the papers proving the right to take full control of the assets due to breach of contract, they executed a peaceful but unstoppable coup. The entire old board of directors, including Walter and his cronies, was immediately dismissed. All accounting books and computer data were seized for a thorough audit of their fraudulent practices. The first decision of the new management was to terminate the contract of the commercial director, Ethan Hamilton, for incompetence and non-transparent behavior that seriously damaged the company's interests. The termination letter was sent directly to his motel, along with a box for him to collect his few belongings from the office. The shock of losing his career, added to the public humiliation when the evidence of his infidelity and fraud was presented in court, shattered him. His lover, upon learning that he was no longer a wealthy heir, disappeared without a trace, taking with her the pregnancy that Ethan had considered his ace in the hole. He was abandoned in the same way he planned to abandon me. He reaped what he sowed. He lost everything: wife, lover, child, career, fortune, and honor. All that was left were gambling debts and a dark future. The divorce trial was a mere formality. With all the evidence, the court ruled in my favor. Our marriage officially ended. I obtained the divorce without having to divide any assets, as most were mine before the marriage, and the rest he himself had destroyed. The Hamilton family, having lost their house and their company, had to face the remaining debts with banks and lenders. They were completely ruined. The news of their only son's disgrace, combined with the humiliation, caused Walter to suffer a severe stroke. He was left bedridden, paralyzed, dependent on others for the rest of his life. Madeline, the woman accustomed to luxury, had to sell her last pieces of jewelry and start working as a cleaner in restaurants to pay for medical bills and survive. They spent the rest of their days in poverty, illness, and remorse. It was the just end that karma dealt them for their arrogance, greed, and cruelty. After the storm of the divorce and the company acquisition, I officially returned to my true identity: Chloe Vance, president of Ivy Capital. My public appearance caused a great stir in the financial world. My story was in all the newspapers, but I did not revel in victory. The painful experience taught me a valuable lesson about life, people, and the responsibility that comes with power. I decided to use my resources to do something meaningful. The first thing was to restructure Hamilton Construction. I changed its name to New Dawn Construction, symbolizing a new, transparent, and hopeful beginning. I kept the dedicated engineers and workers, firing only the corrupt managers. I implemented a modern management model. I improved wages and working conditions. Within a year, New Dawn became one of the most reputable construction companies in the country, not for ostentation, but for quality and integrity. As for the $10 million estate, the stage of my greatest tragedy, I made an unexpected decision. Instead of selling it to erase the bad memories, I transformed it. I turned it into the headquarters of a new nonprofit project, the Ivy Startup Hub, a business incubator and free co-working space for young entrepreneurs, especially women, with great ideas but few resources. I wanted to use my story and my means to empower others, so that no talented woman would have to give up her dreams for lack of opportunities. The estate, once a symbol of falsehood and pain, became a beacon of rebirth, creativity, and hope. 3 years have passed. My life is now busy but incredibly rewarding. The IV Startup Hub has become a great success, launching dozens of innovative new companies. Seeing the young people I have supported present their projects with confidence fills me with indescribable happiness. New Dawn has also thrived, becoming a construction giant known for its quality and humane corporate culture. One afternoon, standing on the rooftop of the old estate, now a vibrant innovation center, I looked out at the city lighting up. The wind brought the scent of flowers from the garden. I was no longer a girl running from her identity, but a woman who had embraced it and used it as a force for good. I had become the true queen of my own life, not because I was born with a crown, but because I fought and rose up from the very place where I fell. The past with Ethan and his family is now just a lesson learned. I feel no hatred, only gratitude for the strength it gave me to become a better version of myself. Leo came up to the rooftop with a cup of tea. "Everyone has gone, Madam President. Today's event was a great success, thanks to you and everyone, Leo." I smiled. "No, thank you," he said, admiration in his eyes. "You have turned a place of bad memories into a place full of hope and life." I smiled, feeling a deep peace. I was proud that I had not let hatred consume me, that I had transformed my pain into a power to help others. My dawn as President Chloe Vance had just begun, brighter and more promising than ever. Dear listeners, thus concludes the dramatic journey of Chloe, from the deepest humiliation to the pinnacle of power, a story that leaves us reflecting on the true meaning of wealth, the fine line between love and manipulation, and above all, the incredible strength that resides within us, a strength capable of turning pain into power and humiliation into the springboard for a glorious rebirth. Chloe's story is a warning about the danger of losing oneself in love. True love never demands that you give up who you are, but it is also a story of empowerment. The moment Chloe makes that fateful call teaches us that the greatest strength lies not in how much we can endure, but in knowing when to say enough. She did not choose direct confrontation or self-pity. She chose a strategic solution, attacking what they valued most: money and appearance. Her calm and determination were more devastating than any scream or slap. This story is also a scathing satire of false wealth and vanity. The Hamilton family built a house of cards on lies, and when the wave of truth arrived, it collapsed spectacularly. It reminds us that true value lies in character and integrity, not in material possessions. And perhaps the deepest lesson is about Chloe's journey of self-discovery and redemption. Instead of reveling in revenge, she chose a nobler path. She rebuilt a company, creating value and jobs. She transformed a place of pain into a seedbed of dreams for others. She showed that the best way to overcome a traumatic past is not to run from it, but to face it and use its lessons to build a better, more meaningful future, not just for oneself, but for others. True happiness lies not in revenge, but in finding a purpose and spreading kindness. Chloe turned her tragedy into a torch, lighting the way not only for herself but for many others. That is the greatest victory of all. The victory not just of power, but of wisdom and humanity. Thank you for joining us in this reflection. If this story has moved you, please do not hesitate to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss future narratives. Your support is our greatest motivation. Until next time.